Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So before I even get into this video, I just want to say thank you guys so much for getting me to 3,000 subscribers. That is amazing. When I started this channel, I really didn't even think I was ever going to break 1,000. So the fact that I am now at 3,000 is just absolutely awesome. And it just means so much to me that you guys enjoy watching me talk about books, because it's one of my favorite things to do, and I really love this channel. It's like a passion project for me. It's my favorite hobby to do when I'm not working. So I just want to thank you guys so much and let you know that I will be doing a big 3K giveaway. It'll probably be hosted on my Instagram, and I believe it's going to be like very Stephen King oriented. But I will talk more about that probably in my next video, because I haven't quite decided what I'm doing for it yet, because I literally realized yesterday that I had 3K and I'm just so ecstatic. So yes. Anyways, you guys may have seen my recent review of All Hallows by Christopher Golden, and when I was reading that book, it got me thinking a lot about the fact that that book reminded me of the general mood of Trick or Treat, which is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. So I was thinking, like, what other horror books have I read that give me kind of the vibe of a horror film? And it was actually kind of hard for me to think of a bunch of books that reminded me of some of my favorite horror films that weren't, you know, like adaptations of books. So I've come up with 5 books today that is kind of a, if you love this movie, then you might love this book kind of thing, like they do on the TikTok. Yeah, and I think I might do a little series of this, because when I was going through my bookshelves, I found about 15 books, so I think I'm going to do like increments of 5. And if you enjoy these videos, let me know down in the comments down below. But yeah, if you're a horror movie fan, hopefully these are some books that will also get you into horror lit. So first up, because this is what inspired this whole thing, All Hallows by Christopher Golden. This is definitely the book to read if you are a fan of Trick or Treat. And what I loved about this is that Trick or Treat is a sort of stylized anthology film based on one central supernatural spirit of Halloween on Halloween night, and just kind of his interactions with the different people of the town that he is in. Which is very, very similar to All Hallows, except they are not ripoffs of one another at all, but there is kind of this like spirit of Halloween, this like the cunning man character who interacts with all these different families in this neighborhood on Halloween night. And while they are very, very different stories, the general tone and theme felt very, very similar to me. It was just honestly what I want. I want another Trick or Treat, because I love that movie. It's the perfect Halloween horror movie. Like, that's just, like, so focused on the concept of Halloween and trick-or-treating and all of the traditions, pumpkin carving. I know there's obviously, like, Halloween, like Mike Myers, and that is, of course, a great Halloween film, but I don't think it truly captivates the essence of being a kid during Halloween the way Trick or Treat does, and I felt that All Hallows really, really, really nailed that. I'm going to read the inside flap for y'all, just in case you haven't heard of this book or haven't seen my review. I think I'm going to do that for all of these books, just to expose you guys to the plots. So it says, it's Halloween night 1984 in Coventry, Massachusetts, and 2 families are unraveling. Up and down the street, secrets are being revealed, and all the while, mixed in with the trick-or-treaters of all ages, 4 children who do not belong are walking door to door, merging with the kids of Parmenter Road. Children in vintage costumes with faded, eerie makeup. They seem terrified, and they beg the neighborhood kids to hide them away and to keep them safe from the cunning man. There's a small clearing in the woods now that was never there before, and a blackthorn tree that doesn't belong at all. These odd children claim that the cunning man is coming for them, and they want the local kids to protect them. But with families falling apart and the neighborhood splintered by bitterness, who will save the children of Parmenter Road? All Hallows, the one night when everything is a mask. So yeah, I definitely think that if you're into like horror anthologies, if you really want a horror story focused on Halloween night, you gotta go with this. This was just absolutely fantastic, and I'm so, so happy to have read it. All right, next up. This one's a little different. So this is what I believe fans of the Blair Witch Project would be interested in. Now, if you've never seen the Blair Witch Project, it is pretty much the pivotal found footage film. It was basically marketed to audiences as being real, and obviously it was not. However, it paved the way for found footage as we know it. Without Blair Witch Project, we probably wouldn't have Paranormal Activity. Completely redefined a genre in horror film and brought it to full popularity. And it is a really amazing movie based entirely on recordings of these kids out in the woods looking for this legendary witch in Maryland. Now, I was thinking, what is a found footage book? And the one that popped out to me was Max Brooks's Devolution. Now, while this isn't about witches and it's not about a documentary crew going out to find something supernatural, this entire book is told through diary entries of a woman's experience in like this commune out in Washington State. I believe it's Washington State. It's the Pacific Northwest. And discovering that Bigfoot, Sasquatches, are real. I really, really love this. Max Brooks, as many of you know, wrote World War Z. He's kind of a big name in the horror world. And I thought this was super creative and super fun. And it felt like watching a found footage film through these diary entries. It was really cool. You really only got the perspective of our one character, only through what she could tell us in her entries, the same way that you only see what's on the camera of our 3 main characters in the Blair Witch. I'm going to read the inside flap. As the ash and chaos from Mount Rainer's eruption swirled and finally settled, the story of the Green Loop massacre has passed unnoticed, unexamined, until now. The journals of resident Kate Holland, recovered from the town's bloody wreckage, capture a tale too harrowing and too earth-shattering in its implications to be forgotten. In these pages, Max Brooks brings Kate's extraordinary account to light for the first time, faithfully reproducing her words alongside his own extensive investigations into the massacre and the legendary beasts behind it. Kate's is a tale of unexpected strength and resilience, of humanity's defiance in the face of a terrible predator's gaze, and inevitably of savagery and death. Yet it is also far more than that. Because if what Kate Holland saw in those days is real, then we must accept the impossible. We must accept that the creature known as Bigfoot walks among us, and that it is a beast of terrible strength and ferocity. Part survival narrative, part bloody horror tale, part scientific journey into the boundaries between truth and fiction. This is a Bigfoot story as only Max Brooks could chronicle it, and like none you've ever read before. So I do definitely think that if you enjoy The Blair Witch, you will really like this kind of found footage style story. I really, really loved this book. It was really, really fun. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is going to be inspired by The Last of Us. So not a movie, but definitely a TV show, and a video game. One that I think a lot of us would accept as part of like the horror world. If you have not seen The Last of Us or you have not played the game, go watch it. Pedro Pascal is amazing. But I remember watching, I had just read this book. I played the game originally years ago when it first came out. And then I started reading this book right at the beginning, right at the end of 2022, right before The Last of Us came out. And as I was watching The Last of Us, I just started picking up on how much they were similar in tone and even in names. And I now kind of wonder if Ronald Malfi like purposely chose to name one of the characters what he did after The Last of Us. But if you are a fan of The Last of Us, you should absolutely read The Night Parade by Ronald Malfi. This is one of the coolest kind of apocalyptic stories I have read. Unlike The Last of Us, it is not going to focus on like spore creatures. There are no clickers in this. This really focuses primarily on the depravity of humanity at the end of the world, and as well as the ability that there might be a possible cure and then a father-daughter relationship. So very, very similar in tone to The Last of Us, but very, very, very beautifully, beautifully written. I'm going to read the premise off of Goodreads because I just have this Cemetery Dance version of it and it doesn't have a synopsis on the back for y'all. First the birds disappeared. Then the insects took over. Then the madness began. They call it wanderer's folly, a disease of delusions, of daydreams and nightmares, a plague threatening to wipe out the human race. After 2 years of creeping decay, David Arlen woke up one morning thinking that the worst was over. By midnight, he's bleeding and terrified. His wife is dead, and he's on the run in a stolen car with his 8-year-old daughter, who may be the key to a cure. Ellie is a special girl, deep, insightful, and she knows David is lying to her. lying about her mother, lying about what they were running from, and lying about what he sees when he takes his eyes off the road. This book is absolutely beautiful. While it might sound a little while at first it might sound very, very similar to The Last of Us, I think it's just probably like inspired by the concept, because they are very, very different. But at the core root of it, it is a story of survival, the relationship between a father and a daughter. And in my opinion, this book is much, much darker than The Last of Us. Like, much, much darker. And Ronald Malfi does this incredible job of blending, like, heartfelt beauty with grief. And Come With Me is probably the best example of that. But when he gets very emotional and talks about, like, the relationships between, like, father and daughter, husband and wife, like, he just has a way to write so beautifully and realistically and introspectively. And I think that's one of Malfi's shining accomplishments, is the way he can write relationships like that. And I think The Night Parade is the best thing that he's ever written. So if you are a fan of The Last of Us, I think you will really, really enjoy The Night Parade. It is phenomenal. It is fast-paced. It is emotional. It is draining. It is action-packed. It's awesome. And I highly, highly recommend it. All right, so next up is another book that I've read recently, and it was pretty much marketed to me as a book that you should read if you like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And now the author really stresses that the similarities of Texas Chainsaw Massacre are there. It is not the film that inspired her to write the book. The film that inspired her to write the book is actually called Chained, which is a 2012 film. But this is Brother by Anya Allborn, and this is a really, really unique book. This is an interesting book because it's a look at a character. It's looking from the perspective of a character in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre style family. You know, like these like kind of backwoods cannibals, through a sympathetic lens. And it's really interesting to look at somebody who is so horrific in what they do and kind of who they are, and see them as tragic figures. And I think that's what makes Brother so freaking awesome. And this book just kind of kept me glued to it. It is disturbing. It is depraved. It is absolutely bonkers. There are very few likable characters in this book. And yet, at the core root of it, you feel this gut-wrenching sympathy for this person who has committed some of the worst acts ever. And I think Anya Allborn's ability to get inside of the character's head and make the reader feel sympathy for him is absolutely fantastic. And it's so strange because you can see how evil this character is, and then you see why, and then you question, is he evil? Is he manipulated? It's just fabulous. It's a great character study. It's called Brother because it pretty much takes our main character in and shows him up as a reflection of his relationship with his brother and then their parallel lives together. And I find it just fascinating character study. I'm going to read the back of the book for y'all. Deep in the heart of Appalachia stands a crooked farmhouse miles from any road. The Morrows keep to themselves, and it served them well so far. When girls go missing off the side of the highway, the cops don't knock on their door, which is a good thing, seeing as to what's buried in the Morrows' backyard. But 19-year-old Michael Morrow isn't like the rest of his family. He doesn't take pleasure in the screams that echo through the trees. Michael pines for normalcy, and he's sure that someday he'll see the world beyond West Virginia. When he meets Alice, a pretty girl working at a record shop in the small nearby town of Dahlia, he's immediately smitten. For a moment, he nearly forgets about the monster he's become. But his brother Rebel is all too eager to remind Michael of his place. Anya Allborn is really known for writing familial horror. She really likes to focus on the family as a unit and kind of disembowel it. And this, I think, is her strongest. If you've read Seed, or if you've read Palmetto, if you've read Dark Across the Bay, all very similar tones, though I think this one executes it the best. And the highlighting of the relationship between two brothers in such a horrific situation and their different responses, again, fascinating. So this is definitely very Texas Chainsaw Massacre-y, as well as in Tobe Hooper's film. A lot of the scariest scenes are shot in broad daylight. A lot of the scariest scenes in this book take place in broad daylight. And I think that's a really cool thing to do, especially in horror cinema. Not so much in books, because it's not really about like the atmosphere of what you're seeing in front of you, because it's just pages. But I just love like the way that some of the scariest scenes in this do happen during like daytime. And it's the isolation of this family that really contributes to how they are able to get away with what they do. very much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So if you enjoy that film, I think you'll really, really love this book. All right, and last but not least, I just saw Scream 6. Scream is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think it's brilliant. I think Matthew Lillard's Stu Macher is the best Ghostface there is. Please, for the love of God, bring him back. And I really adore the Scream franchise. I love how meta it is, and I love how the more and more sequels they make and the bigger budgets they get, like, the more meta and self-aware they become. And I think it's a really cool thing to talk about horror films and all of the cliches that horror movies follow in such an open tone within a horror movie. And when I was thinking about Scream and all of the Scream films, the book that came to mind for me first was Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. And while this isn't a critique of horror films, it is a very meta, self-aware critique of horror writers. Especially in today's like digital age where everything is recorded. I think Kill Creek is really fun. I think it's really absurdist. I think it's really self-aware, and I love the way it pokes fun of larger-than-life authors like Stephen King, the authors that raised you like R.L. Stine, the more extreme authors like Poppy Z. Brite. It really touches on all of the major cliches of horror giants in literature today. And I loved it. This is such a fun, meta, over-the-top read, and it's so self-aware and just so fun. And just reminds me of the tone of Scream, even though the plot is completely different. So I'm going to read the inside flap. At the end of a dark prairie road, nearly forgotten in the Kansas countryside, is the Finch house. For years it has remained empty, overgrown, abandoned. Soon the door will be open for the first time in decades, but something is waiting, lurking in the shadows, anxious to meet its new guest. When best-selling horror author Sam McGarver is invited to spend Halloween night in one of the world's most infamous haunted houses, he reluctantly agrees. At least he won't be alone. Joining him are 3 other masters of the macabre, writers who have helped shape modern horror. But what begins as a simple publicity stunt will become a fight for survival. The entity they have awakened will follow them, torment them, threatening to make them a part of the bloody legacy of Kill Creek. What I love about this is where Scream is a slasher, and it's very self-aware of the slasher genre as well as just horror movie tropes in general. The pivotal defining horror film is probably going to be considered a slasher movie. Whereas the pivoting defining horror story is going to be a haunting. It's a ghost story. And this is not a slasher, but it is about a haunted house. And I just love how in tune with like the horror lit world Scott Thomas was when writing this. If you love and appreciate all forms of the horror genre, this book is so fun. And it's not perfect. It's not, and you have to really like meta to like this book, but I thought it was absolutely awesome, and I loved the critiques and the points that it made. It's something that made me like Gothic by Philip Fracassi so much more. I do really like Philip Fracassi's writing, but there's this meta aspect critiquing the horror-lit world from a horror writer's perspective, told by a horror writer, like just the levels in Gothic that was so reminiscent of Kill Creek. That if you're into meta horror, it's gotta be this one. It's so much fun. It's so weird and wacky and creepy all at the same time. Very much like Scream. Anyway, so those are my 5 books that I highly suggest you read if you are interested in any of the above horror movies. Let me know what you guys think of this series, because if you enjoy it, I will totally continue it. I definitely have some more, and since I'm always reading, I think I will definitely find more. But I love horror movies, I love horror books, and I love when we can get them to come together. Anyways, that's all that I have for you guys today. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. If you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.